Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Keeley, Private Practice Section Student SIG President, and I'm joined with Trent Salo, who's also an Executive Board Member of the Private Practice Section Student SIG. And we're joined today by Dr. Jarod Carter, and we're going to just have an interview with him and ask him about how he got started in private practice and his cash-based business. So, Jarod, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So, as we talked about before coming on here, I've essentially two businesses. One is a cash-based physical therapy practice, and then the other is teaching about cash-based PT online, via blog and podcast and ebooks and things like that. So, did you want to know kind of how I entered both, or anything in particular? Or?
Yeah, so I would love to know a little bit about your journey, starting from after you graduated from PT school. What did you do, and then when did you take the plunge to kind of go out on your own?
Okay, cool. So it's a bit of a story. So I graduated end of 2005 from University of St. Augustine in St. Augustine, and coming out, I don't know where I got this idea. I probably learned it somewhere along the way, but my big focus in getting my first job. Of course, I wanted to make as much money as I could, but the focus really was on finding the best possible mentor in the area of specialty where I was heading, which was manual therapy. So luckily, one of the kind of most credentialed people I could find at that time was in Austin, where I planned on getting a job. So I got a job with him and worked for a little over a year with him before a really interesting opportunity came up that I really couldn't pass up, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But my big focus was on really finding someone who I knew was going to take me under his or her wing, and not just kind of see me as another employee, but see me as someone that they could really develop into a great therapist, and possibly someone who would help run the business side of things as well, because I knew that I was interested in both. So did that, and would have done that for, I'm sure, quite a while, but an opportunity came along where I was able to be a private physical therapist for a very wealthy couple, and ended up traveling with them for a little over a year, and just kind of all over the world, all over the country. It was a really unique opportunity, and got to experience kind of just coming up. I had always been in a family that was kind of paycheck to paycheck, and being exposed to that type of wealth was really eye-opening. And one of the things I really, I think, realized from that was that in all these very wealthy people I met along the way, that it was more of a mindset thing that helped them develop wealth, as opposed to what a lot of people just think, if they're not already wealthy, of, oh, it was just handed to them or something like that. They're generally extremely willing to work incredibly hard for as long as it took. It was just amazing, and they also didn't have an idea of kind of a lack mindset. So I feel really fortunate, if nothing else, to have just been exposed to that, and coming out of that opportunity, or that work scenario. Definitely viewed things in a different way in terms of business, and a lot of what I did with in terms of having the guy who was a really great businessman. Whenever he was on the table, I was doing manual therapy. He was usually on the phone doing business deals, and so I really felt like I got kind of a real world MBA out of that situation, and it was great. And so I did a bit of travel after that. I figured if I went right back into a work scenario or my own practice, that I wouldn't get a chance to do some traveling that I wanted to do. So I went down to Panama, and I wanted to get better at salsa dancing and Spanish. So did that for a couple months. And when I was down there, one of the physical therapists that I had shadowed with pre-physical therapy school, who was an incredible manual therapist, had reached out to a friend of mine because he was looking to hire someone, and he remembered me, and he was just kind of like, hey, do you know where Jarod is? And so my friend emailed me and put us in touch, and that pretty much brought me back to Austin, and worked there for about a year and a half. Now that was a cash-based practice, and all my clinical rotations and in my first work scenario was insurance-based. So at that point, I had had exposure to both, the traditional insurance-based practice approach and the cash-based practice. And when it came time that I decided, for a variety of reasons, that it was time to leave that position, and I wasn't 100% sure I was going to go directly into private practice, but I'd had enough patients from that former position that were seeking me out and asking me, hey, are you still in town? Can I get treatment? And I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I can come to your house, with my treatment table. So that's kind of how my practice started, and I knew as soon as I made the decision to go into private practice, I knew, being exposed to both models and having seen that people were willing to go out of network and see me on a cash pay basis, that there was really no way I wanted to go in the insurance-based direction. Even though growth might be a little faster and easier in that realm, I also kind of just through the years had seen the not so positive changes in the industry, and how reimbursements were getting worse rather than better, and I could kind of see where it was headed over the next 10 to 15 years and how rough it may end up getting. And so I just thought, let's try cash pay first, and if it doesn't work out, I can go the other route, but I'm going to work my butt off and see if I can make it happen. And it happened faster than I thought, and about 6 months into it, I was starting to have fully booked days. Actually, a fully booked week was about 6 months into it. When I say fully booked, because it was all me. I was doing admin as well, and it's hour-long sessions. Probably 50 minutes of that is spent with my hands on the patient. I was kind of limiting myself to 5 or 6 a day. So I started having those fully booked weeks about half a year into it. And after maybe another 3 or 4 months, I was looking around for some answers to a question one of my patients brought up. I said, I'm trying to remember exactly what she said. I was working on this patient, and she said, so once Obamacare goes through, you're probably gonna have to start taking insurance, right? And I was like, no, why do you say that? She said, well, I figured if everyone was forced to buy it, then all providers would be forced to take it. And I was like, oh man, it's kind of a scary thought. So I decided to look deeper into that question, and resoundingly, I heard back that at least as of now, no, it's capitalism is still alive and well, and business owners can choose to do what they want, and we can't be forced into that system. I don't know if that will always be the case, but at least for now, I was happy with that answer. But in the process, I had a number of people saying, wait a minute, you're just a year into this, and you got a busy cash practice. How does that work? Can you tell us about it? So that's when the kind of light went off. I looked around, no one was really talking about it online. I decided that I wanted to start teaching about it, because I saw this kind of tidal wave of issues that were already in the works in our industry. It seems like every impact magazine, not every, but most of them, most conferences, or at least a lot of the presentations at conferences, this idea of quick change and being able to adjust to it, and how are we going to deal with this or that, because it's nothing's the same as it used to be. That's already a big thing, and it's only, in my opinion, going to get bigger. And so I realized, this is one of the ways that I think future practice owners, current and future practice owners, are going to be able to deal with declining reimbursements and a lot of the challenges with incredible amounts of overhead and documentation issues, and just audit problems, and just all these things that add to the headaches that most practice owners are dealing with today will probably only get worse. I have a model that I'm in that I've seen others do well in. I'm doing well in it. So let's talk about it online. Let's get this information out there, and hopefully at least a few of my colleagues who maybe wouldn't have made it in their private practice can with this information. And I had always been, for probably the last 3 or 4 years, looking into business as a whole. Actually, before that, I mean, I'd always been interested in business, always felt relatively entrepreneurial. I started looking into the idea of having an online business a number of years ago, started studying how that works. And so this was just a really nice fit that I had something that I knew a lot about and not a lot of people were talking about. And so I could, probably make a side business out of it while helping out my profession and some of my colleagues. And so that's basically the story of how I ended up with a cash-based practice as well as a business teaching about that model.
That was quite the story. That seems like a
long answer.
That seems like an awesome adventure. I have so many questions that I want to ask, but I think I'll start with kind of a basics of, as insurance reimbursement is declining and as physical therapists, I agree with you. I feel like every Impact magazine is about additional revenue sources for your clinic and what can you do to be different and how can you adapt. So my question to you is, I feel like the public still doesn't understand physical therapy very well. So how do you convince them or prove value that it's worth spending cash rather than going to Joe Schmo's PT clinic that takes insurance?
Right. Well, there are a number of ways to go about doing that. And I think the first way is just to start with the clients that you currently have and making sure that you give a much better one-on-one service as well as better results. Doing your best in those areas is one way to do it, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist who's been to a traditional PT clinic, maybe owned by an orthopedic surgeon, who has sat there with 5 other patients at the same time doing a bunch of TheraBand exercises, and then they come to see you and they spend a whole 30 minutes one-on-one, 45 minutes one-on-one, or in my case even an hour one-on-one. They're going to talk about that. So just making sure you do an awesome job and that you set up your services such that they are truly better and different than the traditional, model or your competition in the area. That alone is going to make them not only want to continue to come back as they have new issues come up, but to send their friends and family. So that's a obviously slower way to go about it. Word of mouth is a slower spread of information, but it's a more powerful one. When it's coming from a loved one or friend or family or whatever, then it really has an impact when they say you need to go see XYZ therapist because they, in my case, they do a lot of manual therapy, which was great help to me. It was a lot different than before when all I was doing was exercise and ultrasound, or whatever the case may be, given your specialty. Just make sure that you rise above what they can get in the area, and they're going to be talking about it. It's going to have a lot of impact to those that they mention. Now, on a broader scale and maybe a faster way, then of course we have the internet and blogging and video and all kinds of ways that we can get the message out. Social media, obviously. So I haven't been amazing about doing a ton of video, but I do have blogs on my website as well as video on my website, frequently asked questions. I have a page on my website called What to Expect, and in all those different areas, I make it very clear, whether it's via them seeing me do certain treatments on a video, or and seeing the results in the patient very quickly, or just reading through testimonials that I have on my website or at review sites, how people talk about the practice, about the approach to PT, or the what to expect, the frequently asked questions part of my website. Areas like that where I make it very clear, in other clinics you're often going to be seen with multiple patients at the same time, or if it's one-on-one, it's usually not going to be more than maybe 10 or 15, 20 minutes of time with your therapist. So even if all else is the same in terms of our skill level and knowledge, every visit I'm going to be getting 2 or 3 times more done with you, and therefore you'll probably need that fewer amount of visits to see me. And so for a lot of people who really highly value their time, the idea of, yeah, if I can see this person half as many visits and then just send in the claims myself at the very end of that, even if I don't get any reimbursement from it, well, the copays might have added up, or my deductible so high, I might have paid that much anyways, right? And so making all those kinds of scenarios clear by what you put on your website is going to get people with the right mindset calling you, people who are okay with paying a little more to have a higher quality service, whether it's physical therapy or whatever the service may be. And so what I've found is that in working with other physical therapy practice owners who are trying to transition from an insurance-based practice over, is that you're not wasting your time always, but if you spend a ton of time trying to convince the same type of patient you've always had to all of a sudden convert to cash-based, the cash-based out-of-network approach, you're kind of spinning your wheels. It's better to do things to try to attract people with the right mindset, not the right bank account size. It's not about bank account size. It's about a mindset that I'm willing to pay more to get more and get better faster. And or even if it's a chronic thing where you're not going to get better super fast, people still value that one-on-one time that you can offer. So making sure you cover all those things on all the online channels is really important, and that is the way I educate my current and prospective patients who find me online. And I'm sure that what I write online, and I kind of purposely word things to, in a way, weed out those who may not be a good fit for my clinic. I don't really want to spend 5 or 10 minutes on the phone with someone who I'm going to have to sit there and convince to come in. I'm in a fortunate situation not having to do that, but I don't think that's a good idea to spend your time on that, even in the very beginning when you don't have a ton of patients. You need to be spending your time on getting the right patients in the door, not convincing someone who's really not sure about the value. You can do that via online means and word of mouth through your other patients. So that's how I go about educating the public on what I do and how it's different, and getting people in the clinic.
So kind of on that same path, where do you think the future of physical therapy is going? And what do you think that we, especially the younger generation, although the younger generation of PTs, since we're technically the future, what should we be expecting? What do you think we should be preparing for?
Good question. I think that you should be prepared for things to be transitional and be willing to accept change and move with it. You might want to. There's this little parable story, and some people may get it, some people may not get it. But you might want to read the book "Who Moved My Cheese?" It's a really nice little book. It's a quick read, and I really feel like every physical therapist should read that book, whether young or old, new to the profession or not, because it really is about being okay with change and saying, okay, you know what, things have changed, how can we make this work? And so I don't think that everyone is going to have a cash practice, nor do I think that it would fit with everyone in the future. But the kind of stuff that I put out there is that anyone who's not, as the practice owner, doing something to decrease your reliance on third-party payer reimbursement is going to really struggle in the future. It's going to be very, very difficult to survive only on insurance and Medicare reimbursement. The numbers don't add up. Medicare is basically on its way to being a completely broken system. The only way they're going to keep it from totally imploding is by cutting a lot of what we as providers get paid for our services, and it's sad but true. And I don't want to see Medicare go away. I mean, so many millions of people have paid their whole life into it. You know, I do believe that we need to at least provide the elderly of our country with the stuff that saves lives, and hopefully there's going to be more of an emphasis on wellness and fitness and the things that decrease long-term costs. But you know, the tertiary services like PT and speech and the things that aren't like keeping people alive in the moment, we're going to see some big cuts. There's no mathematical way around it. The baby boomers are exiting the workforce, and there's just not going to be as many people paying into the system as taking out of it, or at least not as much going in as coming out. So change is on the way, and if we're totally reliant on the old systems, it's going to be a struggle. So I would say to keep that in mind, and not in like a fearful way, but just knowing that you're going to need to be an opportunity seeker rather than just following the traditional way. If you are in a practice, you know, where nothing's changing, you can expect that over time you're going to be asked to see more patients per hour per day. And do you want to stay in that scenario and get burnt out, or do you want to do your own thing, or do you want to find someone who's being innovative if you're not interested in maybe your own practice? You know, at least look for someone who's doing, you know, who's incorporating wellness services, fitness services, who's, you know, got other ancillary professionals coming in and offering treatments. You know, maybe they've got some massage therapists that are renting from them, or that they employ some acupuncturists, whatever. You know, there's a ton of different programs and ways to go about it outside of just getting out of network that you could actually bolster your bottom line. I mean, I know there's one of my therapists that I've received some treatment from, or did in the past. He is actually in network with most payers, but he has a huge Pilates component to his business, and so because of the Pilates income, even though he's in network, he still spends an hour with every patient, which is extremely rare. So, you know, by incorporating those other services, being willing to change and see and execute on opportunities, you're going to be able to stay ahead of the curve and still have an enjoyable career where you're really providing a great service. So I would just say be open and willing to see those opportunities, and be a student of business. I mean, this is obviously through the PPS student interest group, so I imagine that most people watching this are interested in becoming private practice owners in the future. So I would say it's never too late to start absorbing information on the non-traditional approaches to revenue generation in a physical therapy practice, whether it's through websites like mine or my podcast, or other sources that are more focused on kind of the wellness and ancillary service type, you know, program generation. Start to learn about that stuff now, even as a student, because you're going to need it as a practice owner in the future.
Those were all really, really good points. I've definitely listened to a few of your podcasts and have poked around your website quite a bit. So kind of bringing it back to a student level, so we don't really get a lot of business education in PT school. I'm a little bit of a different beast because I have a undergrad business degree and I worked in finance for several years before going back to PT school. But do you think that business education should be more stressed and emphasized in PT school, especially with the changing environment?
Well, of course. I do, but I also recognize that with how much they, i.e. PT schools, have to teach us about actually, you know, practicing the physical therapy, there's just so much to squeeze into that 2.5 to 3.5 years, depending on the program, that I think that probably almost every school out there could and should do a better job of the business side of the education. From what I've heard from students and also just recent grads, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's changed all that much in a long time. And so, yeah, I mean, it is time to start making students aware of the changing environment and what they can and should be looking at doing if they ever want to have their own practice. But of course, most PT students are not in school thinking that they're going to have their own practice. I mean, it's just kind of a small percentage. So when we as those current or future entrepreneurs are always gung ho about that answer, oh yeah, it should be a huge component of things, but at the same time, then you think about kind of the time that adds, where there are a lot of students who have no interest in that, and it's not going to really be a great use of their time necessarily. So I think there should be more emphasis on it, and some of these non-traditional methods should become part of the curriculum for sure. Otherwise, those who are going to become, who do want to become practice owners, are really going to be starting out behind the curve if they have not learned that stuff in school. So yeah, I mean, in general, I think that it's the business education in physical therapy schools, from what I've heard and seen, is pretty pitiful, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do get a couple courses in business administration, obviously not to the extent that we would like, but again, that's one of the reasons why we started the private practice student special interest group, is to have an outlet for physical therapy students that are interested, to say, hey, I know I can go to this resource that is specifically designed to provide information for students. So along those same lines, Jarod, knowing now some things, I mean, you've been in practice for quite a while, you're pretty successful, it sounds like. What are some things, big picture-wise, or business concepts that you wish you knew as a new grad or a student? Would have maybe changed the way you started out if you knew them when you just began your career?
If I knew them when I just began, I feel fortunate to have gone into my first job with that really strong emphasis on finding a good mentor rather than finding the highest salary. And that is something that I fortunately went into it with, but I guess since there's a lot of students watching, I would just emphasize that that if you don't already know that, I mean, of course, your starting salary is important if you're going to be in a job for any given time. That's the benchmark from which all raises come from. So you might even, I'm big on, and we did at University of St. Augustine a hangout like this, where we talked about negotiation skills, and unfortunately that wasn't recorded and posted up, but I do have, there's a video on my website, on my YouTube channel, where I'm addressing some students and talking about things to look into and prepare for to help with that negotiation and that, getting that higher salary. But I think just as really more important is saying, okay, what direction do I want to head, and who can help me get there, and who is going to be really focused on helping me get there. And it's not that a practice owner is going to be like, I want to hire this person so that in 3 years they can go and start their own practice. Obviously, it's not about that, but I mean, there can be partnerships made, and just finding someone who is clearly emphasizing continuing education and the development of your skills and development of you as a business person as well. That's just huge. It's so big, and that's what I'd really be looking for. And I'm trying to think of more specifically your question of what do you wish you would have known. I was also lucky to have seen enough in my internships to see the struggles of the insurance reimbursement arena, and you can still make a lot of money as a practice owner, all on reimbursements. It's just getting lower and lower, and even from the 10 years ago when I graduated, a lot has changed. So, but I could also already see the writing on the wall to a degree, maybe not nearly as much as I see it now, and we all see it now. Gosh, I don't know. I feel like I just have been really fortunate to come across the right people and the right information along the way, to where I came out, I knew the direction I wanted to head. I wanted to become a much better manual therapist, find a mentor in that region, and then kind of branch out from there and see what happened. I would say just, work on being a student of business. If you want to be a practice owner, don't rely just on other clinical practice owners for information. Find the really great blogs and books on business as a whole, on management, on employee relations, on human resources. I mean, anything and everything that you can grab do so. And I know it's very difficult to incorporate even more when you're already a student. It's so intense in physical therapy school. I mean, even 10 years later, I remember how crazy it was. And so, I mean, hats off to you guys for being so big on the business side of things and running stuff like this, even in the midst of your really busy schedule. I really applaud that. And for those of you out there who have taken the time to watch this and watch things like this, I mean, you're already making the right moves. But I would just say, as much as possible, as much as your schedule allows, to find good business books, good books on business. Peter Drucker, he's former Harvard professor of business school for a long, long time. He has a lot of great books out there on general management principles. There's one called Essential Drucker, or The Essential Drucker. Hold on. I think it's by my bedside, actually. But you might check that one out. I mean, there's thousands of really great books. So just having something by your bedside to read before you go to sleep, and having good podcasts so that when you are working out, you can be absorbing information. That's how I get a lot of my business information, is when I'm on the road or in the gym. I'm listening to business podcasts. So just be a student of business, and then hopefully you won't be. Hopefully you'll be in a situation like me, where 10 years from now, someone will ask you, "What do you wish you knew that you know now?" And you can say, I feel like I came across all the right information before I made any huge mistakes.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure it's probably fun looking back and trying to figure out, well, what do I wish I knew then? When just starting your practice. Now, Jarod, talking on the topic of being in addition to being a private practice owner, this is sort of a question that I've had, is that I want to be an excellent clinician, but at the same time I am interested in the business side of things. Now, it is challenging to study business and then study physical therapy. I mean, I feel like you spend most of my day simply just reading research that comes out.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the balance maybe you have, or your thoughts on becoming an excellent clinician, but at the same time becoming an excellent business owner?
Right. Well, one thing I would say is just what I just mentioned, where if you can use those times where you'd normally be just listening to music to absorb information, that really helps. You clearly work out, so you can do that while you're working out. Everyone usually has a commute, at the beginning and end of the day. So use those times don't just take in the news, which is mostly depressing. Don't watch too much TV. Use the times when you'd normally just be sitting somewhere working out to absorb both clinical information. I know there are good clinical podcasts out there that go through research, as well as business information. So that'd be one way. The other balance, I think, comes from just making, let's say your focus is manual therapy like mine is, and I'm not saying I don't want everyone out there to think that you have to go in that direction. It's just what I chose, and I think that it helps me to get faster results in the clinic if I had focused on something else. But whatever your focus is, just make at least one, but preferably 2 or more courses a year an absolute priority, because you get all that information packed into one weekend, as opposed to feeling like you have to spend an hour or 2 a week just trying to keep up with research, right? So you can kind of, we call batch. If you're batching your tasks in any way, batching your information consumption, not checking emails 3 or 4 times a day, but saying every day at this time, I'm going to blaze through it all, or at these 2 times, rather than constantly checking email. If you like social media, don't check it. Don't have notifications on your phone so that you know when anyone's posted anything or whatever. Turn those off, and at the end of the day, then, check it. That's your 30 minutes to deal with social media stuff, and that's it. Those are the kind of things, when you get really busy, when you're a practice owner, maybe you have a family, you want to become a great clinician and a better business person, like you just mentioned, you can't constantly, you have to have a system, and you don't want to be constantly throwing different distractors into your day. Like, after this, I've got 3 hours blocked out to work on my book. my upcoming book on Medicare and cash-based PT. And when I'm doing that, my phone will be completely off. You won't see me on social media unless, actually, here's another good way to do this. I have a lot of things. Most of my social media is pre-scheduled via Hootsuite, which is one of those social media platforms. So I have my assistant gather information and schedule it at certain intervals. So if you see anything in the next 3 hours from me, it was pre-scheduled. So not just, I didn't want to say that and then you see a bunch of stuff come out. Like, oh, he's not working on his book. But batching certain things where you've removed as many possible interruptions to focus just on that one thing, and regimenting yourself in that way so that you have specific times of each day or of each week where you really focus in on those things that are going to get you somewhere with your clinical skills or with your business knowledge, as opposed to just constantly just spinning your wheels, getting little tidbits here and there, getting a little bit of this done, but kind of in a distracted way. That's a huge part of creating that work-life balance and that balance between all the different things that you want to accomplish. The other thing I would say to that is something I spoke about, and I think Trent, you might have even, I think you even actually had commented on this podcast. Was it you that talked about the goal setting? You had commented on that with me after that podcast around New Year's?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I do
cool.
remember that.
Great. So obviously
Yep.
you know the
Yep.
answer to this, or you know this idea, but so what I would suggest is that if you already struggle with motivation to get things done and on really working your butt off and being laser focused, if that's a struggle for you, then you should go with all of the standard information about goal setting, and not just setting at the end of the year, but setting quarterly and monthly goals, having a set aside time to review your goals throughout the year. And some people even have kind of their top 5 goals that just sit on their mirror, that they see every morning just to remind themselves. That kind of stuff is really helpful for those who are not already so type A and focused on that stuff already. I am the type that just kind of obsesses about things and always feels like I should be doing more, even though I'm doing a lot. And as soon as I reach a goal, it's like, okay, well, what's next? And I don't get to enjoy the process or smell the roses along the way. I don't stop and enjoy the fruits of my labor, and that was really affecting my happiness. So for those out there who feel like they fall into that category, my suggestion to you, and I think that this is going to be really helpful for going back to Trent's original question of this balance of, okay, if you want to, say in Trent's case, become a better business, you kind of get an idea of the direction you want to head, but you don't have to set like some specific goal of, okay, I want to have a revenue of $500,000 in the clinic this year. You might think, I want to generate more revenue than I did last year via these methods. But you have a general direction that you want to go, and then you reverse engineer. It's like, okay, what can I do on a daily and weekly basis to reach those, to move in that direction? So if it's just becoming a better clinician, well then, on each day or every other day, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes listening to a podcast or reading the most recent research, or I'm going to book that next manual therapy course, or whatever the case may be. But if you just pick a daily thing that moves you in that direction, and you don't worry so much about where you're going to be in a month or a year, but just think, what do I need to do on a daily basis to move in the direction I want to move, then you don't get so hung up on these distant goals that once you get there, you're immediately thinking about the next goal, and you can really enjoy things along the way and have much more, like you say, balance in your life. And that's a big part of balance right there. It's not necessarily that you don't, that you take a bunch of time off, that you work really hard and then you take time off. It's more that you enjoy the process. You learn to smell the roses along the way for not to be too cliche, but it really is important for your day-to-day happiness and your balance in life to keep those things in mind. So that's what I'd say to that.
So Thank you. I
Yeah, it's
think
definitely
especially.
some.
Go ahead, Trent.
After listening to that, it's been a lot easier as far as understanding or realizing to submit to the process, essentially. I mean, not get so caught up on always wanting to be there right away.
Right, right. You kind of
But
muted a little bit. Are you?
to just enjoy the journey. So,
Okay.
go ahead, Lauren.
So we're kind of getting towards the end, but one thing that I wanted to ask you about was the APTA and how you feel how do you think that we can kind of engage more physical therapists to be members within the APTA?
Engage more PTs to become members. I'm a proud member myself, and I imagine that most of the people watching now would be. So, of course, would be kind of preaching to the choir. But, well, for one, as a practice owner, I think that actually, you know, you can actually pay part of their compensation can be like, hey, you're gonna be a PTA, an APTA member. I've seen that happen, and I mean that, of course, maybe it's not something they really care about or whatever, but I mean you can pay for that, and then the money that goes towards all the things, the fighting for our profession that is so important. It's there based on every employee you have. So that's one simple way, right? Just buy the memberships for them. But of course, as a small practice, you might, that can get kind of costly. And in terms of just getting people to recognize the benefits, so for one, I would say if you're going to be in the APTA and you're interested in private practice, you need to be a member of the private practice section. And just having, I mean, just Impact Magazine's great. I'm sure you guys read it. It's fantastic. And if you just have all those back orders out and encourage whether it's your workmates or your employees to read them and to gain that information, that alone they're going to start to see some value in the information that is put out by the private practice section. Maybe you kind of ask them to, again, it's like whether you're working with people or employees. If they're employees, you can just say, hey, can you hop on the forums here? I'm going to log you into my PPS membership. Can you hop onto the forums and post this question and kind of be my information messenger here on the forums and tell me what feedback you're getting, and just getting them involved in those kind of processes where they see the value that is given to private practice section members and APT members as a whole. Making the, or encouraging them to maybe do a course online that's offered through the APTA. They have really good online courses, and when you're an APTA member, it's like, I don't know how much the discount is, but it's a big discount, right? So if you did enough of those courses, you'd actually pay for your membership, just with the discounts. So having employees or workmates join you on those kind of things and influencing them to take some online courses along with the other courses they'll be taking, just essentially finding ways where you can put the benefits of the APTA membership a little more tangibly right in front of them and keep it in front of them, so that when you're not around or maybe they move on and do their own thing, if they're not already APTA members, that they say, maybe that makes sense. Because when it's just kind of like this idea of this system over in Virginia/DC, and we still have issues with reimbursements and all that kind of stuff, I think it's easy for people to not really get a tangible idea of how much they do and how important the association is. And so, yeah, putting those things in front of them repeatedly and consistently, I think, is one of the best things we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff, Jarod. Just to finish up, as a private practice section, student special interest group, learning to market ourselves, especially as new grads and trying to land our first position. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways we do that is to have maybe a 20 or 30 second elevator speech or pitch, or why we are different, our unique value proposition, if you will. Can you share your 30-second elevator pitch? If somebody comes up to you and says, what do you mean you don't accept insurance? Or why should I come to your clinic?
Sure. You were breaking up a little bit. You said, can I share my 30-second pitch on if someone asks me personally why they should come to my clinic? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry
that's what he was
that.
asking.
Okay.
Yep.
No problem. No, it's probably my computer. So someone says, why should I come to your practice if you don't take my insurance? I say, well, it depends. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. But in my practice, I spend a full hour one-on-one with every patient, and most of that time is spent with hands-on manual therapy. I, of course, teach stretches and exercises that are needed to support our work in the clinic, but I never have anyone do things in the clinic that they could be doing on their own. I don't think that's a good use of time. And so if you've ever been to other physical therapy clinics, you'll probably see that the one-on-one time is minimal, if there's any at all. Usually PTs are having to see multiple patients at a time, unfortunately. And so by taking myself out of the insurance system, I'm able to spend that full one-on-one hour with each client, and therefore I'm usually able to get people better in no more than half the amount of visits that they would take at other clinics. So if that cost savings in time, as well as the additional copays, works out where you'd rather have less visits and a little bit higher, or a much higher level of service, then my clinic would be something to look into. And so I don't really, I'm not huge on being needy or, oh, you really should consider it and blah, blah. I just lay it out like what you get at my clinic is going to be a higher level of one-on-one service. And if that's something that appeals to you, even though it costs more up front, or usually will cost more up front, depending, then great. Give me a call, or I'll break out my phone and let's schedule something right now. And then, of course, here in Texas, I have to say, now you will need a physical therapy referral for us to get started, which we're working. We just started another legislative session. We're working hard on changing that. But at any rate, it's more about, I try to kind of get an idea of if their mindset is someone who's going to be happy to be there and be getting that higher level service and and at least okay with paying it. If I don't really want to attract anyone that's like begrudgingly taking out their card and, oh, that hurt even though I feel so much better. I don't mess with that so much, and so I don't speak about it in an arrogant way, but I just kind of say it in a little bit of a matter of fact. Here's what it's like. Here's how it's different, and if that appeals to you, great. Let's get started. And with a lot of confidence that I am going to give them a much higher level of service. And if you're speaking in that way, what you say is important, but how you say it is probably even more important. So for the students out there, and you're talking about, having a 30-second elevator pitch of a UVP, you need to practice that enough to where you feel ultra confident in it. And when I say practice, I don't mean memorize specific words like these are the 5 sentences I would say. Just the general 3, say, bullet points of how you are different, so that you could cover it very confidently in 30 seconds, or you could have an hour conversation about how that applies to what you would do for them in the clinic and for their business. But the confidence in how you speak about yourself is hugely important, and it takes practice, and you need to work on that before you go sit down in those interviews and those negotiations.
Thank you. I think that that's really important to understand, of even practicing it with classmates or other people, so that you can come off confident but not arrogant, because there's definitely a difference between those. But yeah, I think that sometimes students struggle with confidence for sure. So we're out of time. Is there anything else?
Can I just real quick Can I just throw something in there? Because that reminded me of one of my first negotiations. And when it got, we went through all this talking, went and saw it was going great, and it came to that dreaded point of the negotiation on salary. And so And so the interviewer said, you know, so what are you thinking you want to make? And I immediately went into all of these like qualifiers, and I was like, well, given, you know, I'm valedictorian and I'm gonna be able to get my manual therapy certification within 6 months because it's, you know, I've already taken the courses. I really feel like I can hit the ground running. He goes, just throw out a number, Chief. And and so it was so funny, and I was like, and then I threw out this number, and he was like, yeah, we can do that. And then I just thought, oh, you know, I should have thrown out a higher number. So, and I'm sure I would have made more, you know. So I'm not saying throw out ridiculous numbers, but I'm saying, like, because I kind of lacked that confidence and felt like I needed to further qualify when he was really already sold on me. You know, if you have a great interview, they've got your resume, you've talked about all the things you can do. You don't need to go into that and try to sell them more. If they say, what do you want to make? Then say, you know, $5,000 more than you really want to make, and hopefully you get what you really want to make. So I just wanted to throw that in there. You just reminded me of that.
No, I think that's a really good point, and that's a funny story. So in my undergrad, I actually had a whole entire class on salary negotiation. So, and I know that for a lot of my classmates, this will be the first time that they negotiate a salary, or they won't even negotiate a salary. They'll just accept the salary. But I do think that it's really important to understand, you know, what you might offer someone in Austin is going to be totally different than what I'm expected to make in Denver.
Right.
Kind of thing. So it's definitely important to kind of do your due diligence about the market in which you're applying for positions and understand what a reasonable salary is.
Right. Right.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we sign off?
Well, I mean, if you are, depending on your direction, but I'm guessing most of you out there want to go in the private practice direction at some point, I just reiterate, start with a great mentor, make continuing education a huge focus in your specialty, be a student of business starting now, and, you know, if you're interested in the cash-based model, you can go to my website. It's right there on the screen, but in case you don't see it, it's drjarodcarter.com. And you know, in terms of consuming information in a time-effective manner, I've got a podcast that's been going for about a year now, where some of it's just me talking about different concepts, but it's mostly interviews of other practice owners who are in the out-of-network model. So check that out for sure at my website, and just consume as much information as you can. And you know, there's a lot of possibilities out there. Don't go into it fearfully. Just know that there's always opportunities to capitalize on. You just got to be open to actively looking for them and brave enough to try to execute on them.
Thank you so much. I think that was a great ending, to not be scared or fearful. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will post the YouTube link to this interview on Twitter soon, and so if you missed the live broadcast, it will be available on Twitter. And then keep in mind that we'll be doing more interviews with private practice owners in the upcoming weeks, so follow the PPS Student SIG on Twitter for that information. Thank you.